Okay, so like where I was. So Bram, like you said, when you go into discussions, you'll see it here, right? So you'll see the two questions that you have to answer. You know, the first one meaning what's being deemed most important by the parent in the scenario. And then do you think it's opinionated, right? So do you think they should obey, why or why not? You've got your responses that you need to cover at least one of these three things. And then you have your three scenarios. For example, this scenario says, Teresa has studied the piano since she was 4. She has performed classical music with the local symphony orchestra, so she's kind of a big deal. Her friends have invited her to join an indie rock band, and she feels that she could use a break from the classics. Her parents, who have supported her classical training, refuse to allow her to join the band. So you are going to answer them for this. So the question, first one is, what is being valued by the expectation of the parent? So obviously the parents are expecting her to continue with her classical training and not join this band. So what is being placed, what's of most importance to the parents? It should be pretty self-explanatory. And then your opinion. Do you think she should obey her parents or no? And then why or why not? So you're going to answer that in your post in 150 words. So then once you post, that says you must start a thread before you're able to reply to others. So Bram, if you were having a hard time last time, like, I don't know if you did this, you have to click on this. So you'll click on the topic. Give it a second to load. It's all right here again. And then you have to click start a new thread. And that's when you can type in, who should I obey? And then I chose scenario 3. When the parent is valuing blah, 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 the most. This can be seen because they don't want their child to join a rock band. They want her to continue with her classical music. 2. I think Teresa should not obey her parents. Or I think Teresa should obey her parents because. Right, so you're going to write your post, and then after you'll hit post. So I'll show you, I'll post it. Dun, da, da, da. There's my post. I am going to delete this because, well, I'll have to delete it, I think, when I go back as a teacher. Just because it literally means nothing. So give me a second, I'll go back on and delete that. But hopefully you guys should be able to see it wouldn't let you post. See, I don't know why that would, like, try it for this time. I've never had anybody tell me that they haven't been able to post. If you can see the start of thread, then you should be able to post, like, to start a new thread. So I'm not sure why you wouldn't be able to. Okay. That being said, after our note today, we're going to go over the scenarios. We're going to talk about obedience, the term obedience, and what that means. It's not very long, like Mason said. It's only, I think, 4 slides, something of actual writing. And then you guys can do your post. And then this afternoon you can do your short reading and then do your handout, and then it's in the Dropbox. And then I said continue to work on your test review. All right, so hopefully you're all good with that. We're going to go through our note first, and then I have, like I said, some examples to show you guys for the scrapbook. So we're going to skip this because obviously this would be a discussion. When you hear the word obey, what do you think? We're just going to jump right into the note itself. All right, so your title is Who Should I Obey? So as per usual, if you are writing this by hand, once we're done, reading and going over a slide, just give me a thumbs up or something in the chat so I know that you're good to move on to the next slide.
I just finished taking the notes. I'm going to work on the other thing.
Perfect. Careful, Mops. Good boy. Okay. So make sure you know this definition because you will see this on your test review right here, right? Obedience is the discipline that keeps us from acting as if we are the center of the universe. So that's obviously metaphorical, meaning that when there are rules and laws that are put into place and we have to obey them, it keeps us from basically thinking that we are, the best thing around, that it's our way or the highway type thing, right? So the world does not revolve around us and us alone, individually. So that's like what obedience basically is. It's a discipline. Kind of puts us in our place. Sorry, you can probably hear my dog chewing a bone. But at least he's not barking. So the Greek word for obey, it means quite literally to listen or to answer the door. So obviously answering the door is metaphorical. It kind of is supposed to mean like you're answering the door to some, to other perspectives. So you're open-minded. I'll show you what you're probably hearing in the background. So I apologize once this sends in the chat. That is what you can hear. All right. Next. So human society obviously requires that some of its people be given legitimate authority. So we know what that means already, right? So like my significant other is in a position of legitimate authority. He's a police officer. So his job is to work and care for the good of all. And so we as members of society, we are required to obey legitimate authority, but only when they are being legitimate. So if you have a person in a position of power, like a police officer, and they are trying to hold their power over you in an illegitimate way, so in a way that's not appropriate, and doesn't make sense and maybe belittles your human dignity, that in that case you do not need to obey that. But when legitimate authority works to care for the good of all, like police officers should and do, then they are deemed legitimate authority. Hey, stop licking. Chew your bone. Hey. Good boy. You're a good boy. So if you're writing this by hand, let me know when you're good to move on. Just watching my dog chew on this bone, and like, can you just imagine not having fingers and hands to hold on to things? Like I see him like he's like trying to move his paws around to keep the bone upright. I just cannot imagine not being able to just grab onto a cup. Okay, Chloe's good. Bram, are you writing it by hand? Let me know when you're done this slide. Devin, you're usually writing it by hand too. Are you good to go? Ava's done. Brianna, you're usually writing it too. Okay. All right. So why do we obey? So we have some stages of moral development here that we're going to talk about with regards to obedience. So think about, remember we've talked about morality, we've talked about our moral decision making. Obviously, we develop morally. We learn what's right from wrong, on a larger scale as we get older. So the first one with regards to obedience is stage one. Obeying means avoiding punishment. So often we will obey our parents when we're little. Because we don't want to get in trouble. So that's usually the number one thing. You don't think about when you're, 5, 6, or even like 7, just when you're little, even now, maybe you don't necessarily think about doing what your parents tell you because it's respectful and because, you appreciate all they do for you. You just think about like, I got to do this or I'm going to get in crap. So that's the stage one of moral development. We know we need to obey so that way we don't get in trouble. Second stage then, obeying based on looking respectable and living up to the expectations of others. So we all have this inherent drive, to be a nice person, to be a kind person, to be a good person. And so we want to obey so that way we can, we can look like we are living up to that expectation. So like, people can say like, oh, like that's such a, that they're a really nice girl or they're a really nice boy. It's like if you go to your friend's house, then you stay for dinner. I don't know about you guys. Hopefully this is the case. This is how I'm going to raise my kids is, they are very respectful, kind. They offer to help. They offer to clean up. They have really good manners. So that is all obedience. Like you're obeying, norms or social norms. And you look respectful and you're deemed, you look like a nice boy or a nice girl. So that's reasons also why we obey, because then, you want your friend's parents to call your parents and say like, you have a really great kid. They're super respectful, super polite. They were so nice. They were a pleasure to have over. Isn't it cute? So that's a second stage of moral development as to why we obey. So the first being we're just solely afraid of being punished, and then the second is we want to live up to these expectations. And then the third stage is we obey because the rules reflect who we want to be and they reflect what we personally value. So stealing is wrong and you value working for your items and working hard for your stuff that you have. So you obey the laws to not steal from others because you know that other people have worked hard for what they have and it's not right to take it from them. So we obey the rules because we want it, they're put in place for a reason and we can see that and we can respect that. So do you see how the reason for obeying as you move up in these stages of moral development, they get deeper and they have a more, wider understanding of why we obey. Awesome. So if you're writing it by hand, let me know when you are done this slide. And hopefully that makes sense. If you guys have questions about this, just let me know in the chat as we go. And I hope that you guys can kind of see yourselves in these like stages of moral development, right? So think about why you obey. Okay, so legitimate authority and common good. So we know a little bit about these terms already. So we're called to obey all legitimate authority. So, and that's not just like police officers or judges or people that, have the power to put you in jail. This also considers your parents. Your parents are in a position of legitimate authority. Your teachers are, the police, the government, and even the elderly. Like, the phrase respect your elders. It's because they are just by default in a position of legitimate authority. Now, if your parents are asking you to do something that is, not good. It's not right. You don't need to obey that legitimate authority, right? So we only have to obey legitimate authority when it is legitimate, right? So when it's looking out for the goodness of everyone. If, you know, an elderly person that you don't know is getting mad at you or yelling at you or trying to get you in trouble for doing something that you weren't doing anything wrong, that's abusing, you know, the power of just being older. And you don't need to obey something like that. So like I said, legitimate authority will serve the common good, and the common good is, you know, when society can reach their full potential, when everybody in society can reach their full potential, right? So you don't need this definition because you've already got it written down now, probably twice. So the common good, like I said, being the sum of all social conditions allow people to reach their full potential. So I want you to make sure you have the first point and the last point for sure. So an authority that does not respect its weaker members or does not work to promote good relations among its members is not legitimate. So if you have a police officer, which I don't think this would ever happen, but if you had a police officer who was trying to make, you know, somebody to get out of trouble, fight or harm a homeless person, that is A, horrible, and B, not legitimate. That is an abuse of power, and you absolutely do not need to listen to that or respect that. So like I said, get the first point down and the last point down, because you should already know that legitimate authority serves the common good, and you should already know what the common good is. Okay, Ava and Chloe are done. Let me know, Bram and Simon, when you're good to go. Bram's done. And Simon, are you finished with this slide? Perfect. Okay, so there's a difference between obedience and conformity. So we're going to talk about that now, right? So obedience is, you know, as basic an element in the structure of social life. So some systems of authority are required to hold us together. So obedience being one of them. Obedience is following the rules of an authority because these rules represent the kind of person you want to be. So you know that, like, the third stage of moral development is you are obeying rules because you know that they're put there to make sure people are good people. So we're respecting the rules and we're obeying them because we want to. Whereas the opposite, conformity, is where a person will follow the rules, but only because of social pressure, fear, maybe a hope for reward, but deep down they reject them. So for example, like currently right now, you have to wear a mask when you go into any building. Like if you go out in public, basically you got to have a mask. There are a lot of people, unfortunately, that think that COVID is fake and that are anti-maskers and don't want to wear masks. However, these people might conform, meaning they might wear masks when they go to the grocery store or go to Walmart or something. But the only reason that they do so is because of the social pressures that they're going to face if they didn't have a mask on. Maybe there's fear associated with people who are really, you know, get really heated about those that don't wear masks. But deep down, even though they're wearing the mask, they don't want to be, and they don't believe it, and they reject the idea that they should have to. So obedience is following the rules because you want to, because you know that they're put in place for good reasons. Whereas conformity is following the rules because you feel forced to, and you don't want to, you reject them. I hope that makes sense. Let me know when you guys are done this slide. finish your writing. I'm just going to do something here. Chloe's done, Simon's done. Ava and Bram, let me know when you are done. Awesome. Perfect. Okay, so some examples of conformity. You don't need to write these down. And like I gave the example of the anti-maskers, and that's like a negative example, but conformity examples don't need to be negative necessarily. So for example, like a teenager might dress a certain way because he wants to fit in with the rest of the guys in his social group. Or maybe like you might listen to a certain kind of music around different people because the music that you really like, you might get made fun of for it, or you're scared you might get made fun of for it. So like, for example, my significant other, when he was in high school, you know, he played football. He went to college for football too. He played in the CFL. He was, football was basically his life. So he's kind of seen as like a jock. However, he loved listening to the kind of, emo music that I listened to when I was in high school, but I just fit the part. So he was open about how he would never listen to that music, that kind of music around his friends in high school because they would have made fun of him for liking that music. And said, he listened to country music or he listened to rap because that's what his group, listened to. Another example, maybe a 20-year-old college student is going to drink at a party because all of her friends are doing it, but she doesn't want to be the odd one out. So again, you're doing something, you're conforming to something, even though you privately reject it, you don't really want to be. Another example is, and actually Jake has a really good example of a study they did. I can't remember, he would have to explain it to you guys more, but there was a study that he learned about where they had all these different people. I can't remember how to explain it properly, but they had all these different shapes basically, and they had say all these different types of squares, and they had a shape come up on a screen, and they had everybody in this group. So there was like 10 or 15 people, and then one of those, they were all hired except for one person. One person was, just picked from the street. They think that they're in this doing this study, or they're doing this like quiz. They have no idea that everybody else has been hired by the people that are putting the study on. And so they had to look at all these different shapes, for example, and then a shape would come up on the screen and they'd say, okay, pick one by one. You have to pick which shape, is most similar to the one on the screen. And there would be a very obvious answer where you could say like, yeah, that's obviously the right answer. But all the people that were hired for this study picked the wrong answer. They picked something else. They all picked something else. And so then the person who wasn't hired for it, who very clearly would know that they're all wrong, instead of being like, no, that's not right, and they picked the right one, they'd conform and pick the wrong one as well, so they didn't seem like the only one out. So that's very similar to like this scenario here. So a woman reads a book for her book club, and she really likes it. She enjoys it a lot. But when she gets back to her book club meeting, the other members all hated the book. So rather than going against the group opinion and saying like, actually, I really liked it, she disagrees with the others that the book was terrible. So people by default just do this. But in that study that Jake was telling me about, it's like a study obviously on conformity. They did it again with a different person. And they had, out of that, say 15 people, they had one other person that was hired in the study choose a different option than the rest. And just when that one person chose a different option, even if it wasn't the right option, the fact that they chose a different option from everybody else, the person who wasn't hired for the study would then choose the right answer because they didn't feel like they were the odd one out. Another last example would be a student is unsure about the answers to a particular question posed by the teacher. So when another student in the class provides an answer, the confused student concurs with the answer, believing that the other student is smarter and better informed. So another like elaborate example, or to elaborate on that, would be like if I teach a lesson to you guys and say where we cover content, maybe it's not so much for me because like my course content is pretty easy to understand. But for example, maybe you're in science or math and they teach you about a new formula. And then the teacher says, okay, did everybody understand? Does anybody have any questions, or is anybody totally lost? And then say you're sitting in the classroom and you're totally lost. You're like, I didn't get any of that. I have no idea what's going on. But everybody else in the class is like, yep, no, totally get it. It's fine. The chances of you being the only one to say, I don't get it, are extremely slim, because that's just by nature what we do. So you will likely conform to the opinion of the rest of the class and then just continue on struggling, not knowing what's going on. So in this photo, this is a great example of conformity. So obviously you can see Hitler and other, Nazi guards, and soldiers. So these people are seen as, by them, legitimate authority, right? They're people in a position of authority. And then you have all these children who are, they're called, the children of Hitler, basically. Like they are mini Nazis. So if you saw the movie Jojo Rabbit, you'll kind of understand what I'm talking about. It's a fantastic movie, and I recommend everybody to watch it. But you can see them all saluting to Hitler. So these guys, they're so little that their brains aren't even developed yet fully. Like they've probably never seen a Jewish person before in their life, but they have been fed all this propaganda to tell them that Jewish people are horrible. They're horrible people. They're monsters. They feed them all these lies. And then they have this belief because these are people of in a position of authority. So they believe them. But you can see there's some that are not saluting that look a little bit confused. Like this guy right here, like he looks like he's unsure. And that's normal. But the fact that like for him to say like, you know what, I don't pop out from all these people and say, I don't agree with you. I don't think Jewish people are that bad. Guarantee he's not going to do that because A, back then he probably would have been killed for it. And B, like you just by nature, humans don't want to be the odd one out. So I want you to have this quote down. Basically, obeying only yourself is a formula for both isolation as well as anarchy. So if you hold the opinion that it's your way or no way, like you're not open-minded at all, your opinions and your rules and what you think is how things should be, should go. If that's how you live your life, that's not only a recipe for isolation, meaning that you're just going to be standing alone for most things, but also for anarchy, because most people are not going to share your opinion and you're going to be isolated. Then that will lead to feelings of hatred and anger, and then inevitably anarchy. So let's see if once you get this sentence down. I think this is possibly the last slide that you need to write. Let me just check. Yes. So I'll give you a minute to write the sentence down, and then we'll move on. Okay. So you can pull this up if you want, but this is, like I said, just what you have to do now with your discussion post. So you're going to choose one of the 5 scenarios, and you're going to answer these 2 questions here about the scenario you've chosen, right? So what is being valued by the expectation of the parent? So in other words, what is the parent placing the most importance on? And then do you think they should obey, and then why or why not? So if you think they should obey, then make sure you can explain why. If you think that they shouldn't obey, then also explain why. It's only 150 words, and then after, like, you don't have to do it today. You can come back tomorrow or maybe the next day, and respond to 2 of your classmates' posts. So the rest of the note is literally just the scenarios that I already have posted for you in the discussion. So they're already in there for you. So like I said, I want you guys to choose your scenario, read through them, choose which one you want to do, and do your discussion post. So do that right away, because that should only take you like 15 minutes, really. It should not take you long at all. Do your discussion post, and then you can move on to doing your text reading and then answering your 5 questions in the handout. And then there is a Dropbox. Well, there will be. I'm going to make one right now. There was Dropbox for this handout. So as soon as I make it, you can upload it to the Dropbox. All right, so I will make a Dropbox for that, and then you'll see it'll pop up over here. But what I wanted to do is to show you another example of the Justice Scrapbook. So this is from my class, one of my, class, one of the people from my class in Quad 1. So she did her title page, Justice Scrapbook, Why Act Justly. She threw in some pictures there. And this is her first page. So she said this is like, she did the first piece. And just because you can't find this in the Bible Gateway website, you can just Google this, and I'm sure the post will pop, like the passage will pop up. So like you can just go to a Google page and you'll be able to find it. Oh, maybe this will work now. Oh yeah, there it is. See, alms for the poor. So as water extinguishes a blazing fire, so almsgiving atones for sin. Those who repay favors give thought to the future. When they fall, they will find support. So for some reason, when you type it in, it doesn't find it for you. But if you Google it, you'll be able to see it. So that's the one that she did. So you can see like how she, formatted hers. So here she said, basically the passage says that giving to the poor can make up for sin, and you should perform acts of kindness because God will help you if you ever find yourself in a position where you need help. This connects. So she summarized the passage and what it's teaching about justice in one sentence. And then her next sentence is, this connects to the life of a modern teenager because when you're young, you may not be able to give, for example, money or food to the poor, but you can still act with kindness because you've shown this kindness. And because you've shown this kindness, God will help you later in life if you need his help. So what they had to do, this is something that you won't have to do. They had to talk about whether it was justice or charity. So you don't have to worry about that. But then here, she did her article. There's her article title right here. Community turns little libraries into food and toilet paper sharing stops amid coronavirus. So she said in some towns, so she briefly summarizes in like 3 sentences what the article is about. And then she says here, this article relates to the Bible passage because the article talks about giving to others and showing kindness to others, which is exactly what the passage talked about. And then she posted her link to the article there. So then the next one she did was the Proverbs. So again, this passage basically says to speak up for people who can't speak up for themselves and to speak up for the rights of the poor and the needy. This passage relates to the life of a modern teenager because unfortunately a lot of teens are bullied or get jumped, and if we see this happening, we can speak up for the victims to help this issue just like the passage says. Then this is something that you don't need to worry about. But then here's her article, and the title of her article she found, We Don't Need to Be a Voice for the Voiceless. So it says in this article, it talks about how we shouldn't be a voice for the voiceless, but instead we should take a step back from the microphone and give them a chance to speak instead of speaking for them. So she talks about the article, and then, she connects it to her Bible passage. So this is a really good example. Like I said, this box here is talking about whether it's justice or charity, and you don't need to worry about that because I took that out of your assignment. So instead, you just need this part and this part, as well as like where you found your stuff. So you can see it's not a lot of work. So you got our title page. She's going to say, briefly summarize what the passage says about justice and then how it connects to your life as a modern teenager, what you can do, the title of your article, summary of what the article says, and then the connection to the Bible passage. So it's quite simple. So like I said, you are probably overthinking it. Autumn, when it says, what does it mean valued by the parent's expectation? I said, what is the parent placing the most importance on? So like I said, in the one about Teresa wanting to join the indie rock band, the parents are obviously placing the most value on her continuing her classical training. So I hope that makes sense. Give me a second to stop sharing my screen. Yeah, so like I said, there's the example. It's not a lot of work. You're thinking probably too much about it. Like if you see that example, like Maddie in that example that I just showed you, she would have got a 4+. Like she did a fantastic job. So that is kind of what I'm looking for. If you do it on Microsoft Word, you can still throw in pictures and stuff to make your, obviously might not look as seamless as hers did in that regard. But like I said, you can do it on Canva if you want. You can do it on another program if you want. I don't really care as long as you have it done. So yeah, if you guys have any questions about anything, like I said, right now I want you to go choose your scenario and do your discussion post, and then do your short textbook reading and answer those 5 questions in your handout. And then I'll make a Dropbox for that right now. So other than that, you guys are good to go.
I'm doing I kind of skipped the discussion post. I'm gonna do it after the
Handout.
BWM reading.
Sure.
Me reading. I'm gonna do that first and then the discussion.
That's fine. Like I said,
I'm on the last question for the discussion, so or not the discussion.
Perfect. Like I said, like obviously you guys, because we're virtual, it's up to you kind of to do your time management and to figure out like what you want to get done and when. But as long as you just get it all done by the time it's due, it doesn't really matter what order you do it in. So make sure you work hard. We don't have a whole lot of time left together, so make sure you are getting all your stuff done. Ask me questions if you need them. We can do a one-on-one Teams meeting if you want. That's an option. So just let me know. And I'm here for you guys if you need any help. But other than that, you guys are good to go. If nobody has any other questions, yeah, we're good to go. So I don't see questions.
Everybody.
Yeah, so I will see you guys tomorrow morning then. If you have questions, just let me know. All right, goodbye, my friends.